Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Not much else to say about this one. Let's get right into the news. First, we're coming from an actual piece of good news. You notice how the Republican Party has been kind of basically trying to rig the elections in a couple of states? You know, one of the ones that we know now is Georgia, where a lot of Trumpian electors are trying to get involved and try to ruin the election so that they can, do BS to try and prevent Georgia from happening again. And in Nebraska, there was a huge issue in regards to them wanting to switch their electoral system from a district system to winner takes all. And the big problem was the Nebraska legislature. Fun fact, it's the only state in the union that has a unicameral legislative system, meaning that there is no state senate and no state house. It's just one legislative body. And since the Republicans have 33 members, as opposed to the Democrats who have 15 plus 1 members, because one of the people, Megan Hunt, is a registered independent, but she officially caucuses with it. Although the body itself is actually technically nonpartisan, but partisan divides, you know how it is. Due to that divide, it seemed like it was actually very possible for this to happen. And one thing that was suggested was that the main Democratic Party could then try to change their system as well to counteract this. But unfortunately, that wasn't really an issue that was going to happen because it was way too late for Maine to do so. But it wasn't too late for Nebraska to do so, which has made a lot of people worry, as a lot of people are being ever so confused and worrying about a potential 269 Supreme. Why do I keep saying Supreme Court when I mean fucking the Electoral College, which a lot of people say would be which would be a lot more noticeable and more prevalent if that's one seat went to the Republicans, or at the very least if there is a scenario where you could do it there is a 270 to win map thing where it's there are 3 possible scenarios where there could be a split in the Electoral College that would get 269, which would lead to a lot of issues in regards to that. But it looks like one thing that is preventing, it's one of the funny things is that, again, an African American is seen as one of the people who has saved Joe Biden's 2020 bid because of the fact that Ernie Chambers fought so hard to make sure that this maintained its one electoral seat to go to the Democrats effectively. And it's not even this is universally for Democrats. I think Trump did win this district in 2016, but the fact that it is still divided as such is good enough for Dems. And one interesting thing is that somebody has actually saved democracy once more. A man by the name of Mike McDonnell, his story is actually very interesting. He was originally a pro-life Democrat, basically an anti-choice, anti-abortion Democrat. And Democrats, when they were trying, after Roe v. Wade and a couple of other social issues, they were hey, this is a bit weird. This is a bit sussy baka. So we're going to officially censor you for your choice for this bid. So in response, he decided to leave the Democratic Party and become a registered Republican. But he's maintained his viewpoint on this issue and said, look, I'm just saying, this is the way Nebraska's been doing things. I don't really see a point in changing it. And good on him. That's one thing I could say about him. He's an anti-choice crack nut, but whatever. Democracy may be saved? ? Speaking of crack nuts, there is a huge weird smear campaign going on against Rashida Tlaib. What a surprise. Rashida Tlaib is getting smeared by the mainstream media? Oh boy, what a shock. Now what's interesting is that I actually have, I didn't really know 100% how this went fully, but here is an official timeline of events that is shown on Zeteo, the Mehdi Hassan run website. Alright, so here's the timeline of events as I've seen. On September 12th, Rashida Tlaib called out her state's Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, for announcing charges against 11 pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Michigan, stating, and I quote, Instead of getting justice, not one criminal charge in the Flint water crisis, you're going to spend time trying to use the power of your office to silence people's First Amendment right, Tlaib said during a Black Palestinian Solidarity panel. Then on September 13th, she further elaborated on this by saying, "This is a move that's going to set a precedent, and it's unfair that a Democrat made the move. You would expect that from a Republican, but not a Democrat. It's really unfortunate. We've had the right to dissent, the right to protest. We've done it for climate, the immigration rights movement, for Black lives, and even around issues of injustice among water shutoffs. But it seems that the Attorney General decided that if the issue with Palestine, she was going to treat it differently, and that alone speaks volumes about the possible biases within the agency that she runs." Then, on September 20th, Tlaib was a target of a racist editorial cartoon that I've neglected to mention in the last episode that I did, but very unfortunate, where basically they had Rashida Tlaib, and she was sitting at a desk, and then she's like, why did my pager go off? And it exploded, implying that she is an agent of Hezbollah, and, well, bit racist. Then, on September 22nd, Nestle joined with a bunch of Democrats in condemning the cartoon. Statement goes on relatively good at first. Rashida's religion should not be used in a cartoon to imply that she's a terrorist. It's Islamophobic and wrong. And it's like, okay, cool. That's based. And then randomly, she goes, just as Rashida should not use my religion to imply that I cannot perform my job fairly as Attorney General, it's anti-Semitic and wrong. To which everyone was like, what? Where did this come out of? And then, on Sunday, the September, again, 22nd, Jig Tapper questioned Gretchen Whitmire on the matter, stating, "Do you think that Attorney General Nestle is not doing her job? Because Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is suggesting that she shouldn't be prosecuting these individuals that Nestle says broke the law, and that she's only doing it because she's Jewish and the protesters are not. That's quite the accusation." And Whitmer was smart and actually stated that, she actually dodged the question to an extent. They don't say explicitly what she stated, but they're basically, if I remember correctly, the statement was more like, look, we should have the rights to protest, and, this is individual matter. Then that same day, Anti-Defamation League CEO Jonathan Greenblatt condemned Whitmire for not speaking out against Rashida Tlaib. Keep in mind, the ADL has not actually made an official statement about the fact that literally, Mark Robinson has made open Holocaust denial. They're not going to ignore that. They're going to ignore that. But then when Rashida Tlaib says, "Hey, we should probably not kill children in Palestine," that's a bridge too far, my friends. Then on the 23rd, Dana Bash reinforced the lie by basically saying the same thing again. And it wasn't until a couple days later that all of a sudden magically everyone's like, "Oh wait, no. You see, we need to correct our statements." And that's basically how the media is kind of a bit biased against Rashida Tlaib. No duh. Anyways, let's move on to the main topic because honestly, I'm kind of low-key tired. I'm recording this really late at night on the day before the episode comes out. So, I guess really early in the morning. So I guess we're just gonna do this. In this episode, I'm going to be explaining why the GOP is fascist. And basically, what I'm going to do is use a ton of things to literally show and explain. Well, I mean, not show, more tell in the sense of why the GOP is very obviously fascist. It's a very big thing that is a very big deal because I was one of those people back in the olden days where I would be like, come on, guys, are you really going to call Trump Hitler? Are you for real? Are you insane? That's a little bit hyperbolic, not going to lie. But as the years went on, I'm just sorry, guys. I just gotta be upfront. It really is just going all in on being a fascist. And basically, how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna go through a ton of definitions of fascism and basically explaining in detail why Donald Trump's, platform, ideology, and the GOP as a whole kind of just line up with it. Alright, so first, what is the biggest, most textbook definition of the word fascism? Fascism, a far-right authoritarian ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of the opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation or race, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. Now, there are some people who will actually read some of this and go, well, I mean, come on. They can't, clearly this can't be Donald Trump, because the GOP loves to make the claim of being in favor of individual rights, individuals, like that's one of their big things. But really, Trump is like a very big contrast in that in a lot of regards. You need to look no further than Project 2025, which literally wants to implement a thing that wants to have it so that the literal president gets to have a lot of control over the federal government. The thing that, again, allegedly conservatives don't like. But when Trump does it, oh. Now, the next thing I will look at is Louis Brito, who has published 8 pieces that are kind of basically explanation of fascism. Fascism is the absolute complicity between big capital and the state. When the interests of capitalism are aligned with politics, fascism approaches. Donald Trump and the GOP literally are hand in hand with capitalism. And they're trying to align the interests of economic capitalism with the interests of the government. Which, big thing. By the way, I should mention, this guy's like a Marxist, I believe, so take that with what you will. But don't worry, there'll be other people with like different definitions of fascism that like still generally be in the same premise. Fascism denies the class struggle, but it is the armed capital in it. Fascists fearmonger lower classes about impending economic crises and enlist such individuals to their ranks to avoid competition with unions, workers, and other social groups. One of the big things that I think to an extent this will tie a little bit into point 3 as well, but it really just seemed like, yeah, like they pretend that there really isn't a class struggle, but also kind of like focus on it. And I guess I'll just move into point 3 so I can use to an explanation about like why these 2 points are related. Fascism summons the masses, but it is elitist. Though appealing to the lower classes, aristocracies and the upper class enforce an authoritarian hierarchy through fascism to maintain their own standing. And that's the weird thing about the Republican Party, where it's like they like to claim this huge, they like to claim that they are the working man's candidate. And that's one big thing they're trying to do now, like with Sean O'Brien, where like they're trying to pretend that they're like these vanguards of the workers, but they're not. They're really purely aligned with the elites, with the capitalists. They want to pretend the elites are not them, but the elites are literally 100% them. But in that same vein, they also like are not really pro they're not really pro common man, because they're not. Look at these guys. They're rich. They're elites. They're powerful. They wear suits. Nothing like their supporters at all. Sure, they like to pretend that they're like their supporters, but they're not. Point number 4, fascism is racist. Cultures and races are targeted by fascists to support their purposes. You can't tell, but I looked at the screen and I'm like, really? Like, come on, guys. This is pretty obvious. Attacking Haitians, attacking Mexicans, attacking Muslims, attacking... Literally, the GOP has always been fear-mongering against people of different cultures and races for years. This is nothing new for the Republican Party, and Trump has just exemplified this relentlessly. Remember, Trump literally went on a debate stage, spewed a fake, absolute fabrication about how the Haitians are eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, and it will maintain as part of the, vanguard of the Republican Party. Fascism and capitalism have abhorrent faces that need masks. Revolutionary language, plans, and symbolism are stolen and repurposed by fascists. Kind of always how it is. That's always the truth. Everybody knows this. Fascists can't come up with anything new, so they instead take things from the past. Kind of tying in with the whole reactionary ideology in general. But an example, of course, is Trump can't really do a campaign on his own, as was evident in 2000 when he tried to do a campaign on his own. So he literally just started copying a bunch of other people, and literally, poof, MAGA 2024. 6. Fascism is blessed. Some religious groups typically support fascist movements, providing their blessing. Trump is kind of literally, again, the GOP and everyone as a whole, in the Republican Party, have tried to maintain that their movement is the virtuous one. They want to maintain that the guy who is a literal serial cheater, who has been on multiple sex trafficking things with Jeffrey Epstein, that guy, he is apparently the virtue candidate. He's the candidate of religion and God. Seriously? That guy is more pious than the fucking, like, Catholic choir boy Joe Biden? Fascism is misogynistic. Women are not represented as being independent or recognized for their achievements in fascism. This one's a little bit tricky because, well, I mean, in a platform sense, yes, because they are literally, I mean, it's kind of weird. I'm trying to think, like, because remember, like, I'm trying to think how, like, this right. Yeah, in a platform sense of, like, the whole, like, yeah, like, the women are not seen as independent. They're seen as, like, subordinate to their husbands. And there's not, like, I mean, the only thing that's, like, a slight contradiction is the fact that there are a lot of women fascists in the MAGA movement. Laura Loomer, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tulsi, you know, they're treated nice. Fascism is anti-intellectual. Noting the scientific progress achieved by progressivism, Brito writes, fascism does not invent, it recycles. It only believes in yesterday, an imaginary yesterday that never existed. And I think that's a quote that really is perfect to exemplify the MAGA movement and every fascist conservative movement in general. It recycles. It believes in yesterday, an imaginary yesterday that never existed. Because it's always the thing about conservatives and reactionaries in general. They like to pretend that they're like this great person or like this great thing, and it's just not true. They have this imagined past that they love, but it just doesn't exist. Like, oh yeah, I watched these 80s movies, and the 80s was great. But the reason why the 80s movies look that way is because of just, that's how they did it. That's the fake version of the 80s that they want you to see. That's a thing that I saw on, like, a meme at one point where it's like, a lot of people think the 80s is like this bright and colorful time period, and it's like, but there was actually a lot of brown things and like a lot of bland brown things in the 80s, and that's the point. But that's not what was on TV. That's not what was, like, being shoved down the throats of the children. That was not the thing that they wanted you to see. Much in the same way, there's going to be a lot of periods. I think there's actually going to be, I'm trying to think, because there's a thing that a lot of people, like, said about a recent, like, thing nowadays where it's like, they notice how a lot of TV shows during the COVID-19 pandemic don't really mention COVID at all. Very few of them actually do mention COVID, and that's because a lot of people are afraid of, like, there being, like, a conspiracy of, like, oh, media companies wanted you to pretend that COVID never happened. But anyways, let's move on to the next person, Lawrence Britt, who has 14 characteristics of fascism, which I've already, like, used to explain how Donald Trump was a fascist before, but let's look at them again. The only criticism that I'll have about his, and I think he's more of like a liberal, that's one criticism, I guess, but one thing that is also another criticism of this is that a lot of these analysis of fascist movements are always in the afterfact, like after they win, after they take control, after they do this. But we need to start focusing on them as they grow and as they, like, start getting bigger. Powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascist regimes tend to make consistent use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere as are flag symbols on clothing and public displays. Need I say more? The movement is literally called, quote-unquote, MAGA, Make America Great Again. Come on, it's pretty obvious. Disdain for the recognition of human rights. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need. The people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners, etc. Yeah, kids in cages, that's a big one. Soleimani, that's one. Drone warfare, like, yeah, there are a lot of times where people, like, make a lot of these things. That's pretty bad. Identification of enemies, scapegoats for a unifying cause. The people are rallied into a unifying patriotic frenzy over the need to eliminate a perceived common threat or foe. Racial, ethnic, or religious minorities, liberals, communists, socialists, terrorists, etc. Yeah. Do you remember in 2016, Trump's big enemies were Mexicans, Muslims, and during 2020, it was Antifa. It was the radical left, Marxists, the Marxists in the schools, and in this one, it's pretty much everything. You know, literally, Haitians, Chinese, Marxist liberals, the transgenders, Ukraine. All these groups are seen as like threats to the American way of life for some reason. And yeah, that's very clearly a big issue. 4. Supremacy of the military. Even when there are widespread domestic problems, the military is given a disproportionate amount of government funding, and the domestic agenda is neglected. Soldiers in military service are glamorized. Typical of the GOP in general. They love to glamorize the military. The military is like this greatest thing ever in the history of the world. They won't do anything to actually fix any other issues with the military or any of the actual problems with the soldiers or the veterans or whatever, but they love to glamorize it. They love to be like, yeah, we're the candidacies of the military. Trump literally just did, not that long ago, a photo op at a military graveyard to use in campaign materials. To be like, yeah, I care about the vets. Kamala and Joe, they don't. It's insane, again. 5. Rampant sexism. The governments of fascist nations tend to be almost exclusively male-dominated. Under fascist regimes, traditional gender roles are more rigid, opposition to abortion is high, and as is homophobia and anti-gay legislation and national policy. Really? Really? Come on. The GOP, extremely anti-gay, extremely anti-trans. They believe in traditional values. I mean, come on. Like, a lot of this stuff is like, this is one thing that's so fucking confusing to me. A lot of this is like obvious, like fucking obvious shit. And a lot of people still try to be like, oh, well, actually, no. You can't call the GOP fascist. Bruh, if it quacks and has webbed feet, I mean, what else am I supposed to call it? Also, he takes credit for overturning Roe. Remember that? Number 6, controlled mass media. Sometimes, the media is directly controlled by the government. But in other cases, the media is indirectly controlled by government regulation or sympathetic media spokespeople and executives. Censorship, especially in wartime, is very common. I mean, many people like to point out this, like when I first did this, it's like, yeah, I can't really necessarily give this to Trump because he didn't do anything. But in the most recent election, due to Project 25, he literally wants to have the FCC be directly controlled by the federal government. So yeah, he wants to definitely do number 6. So, whoopsies. Obsession with national security. Fear is used as a motivational tool by the government over the masses. Yeah, again, the invasion at the border, which isn't an invasion. Oh, all these migrants are coming over here. It's not a threat. Yeah, he's very much doing that. Religion and government are intertwined. Governments and fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common for government officials, even when the major tenets of the religion are diametrically opposed to the government's policies or actions. Yeah. Again, very obvious. Remember, Jesus did say at one point that you should sell all your possessions, worship God, and help the poor and disadvantaged. A camel will have an easier time going through the hole of a needle than a rich man gets into the kingdom of heaven. Remember that. He wants to uphold traditional family values, even though he's like a multiple-time divorcee. Corporate power is protected. The industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation are often the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial business-government relationship and the power of elite. Yeah, remember, Donald Trump has literally owns a corporation. Very big oopsie. He's a huge capitalist and gave the rich corporate tax cuts. So, yeah. Labor power is suppressed because the organization power of labor is the only real threat to a fascist government. Labor unions are either eliminated entirely or are severely suppressed. And I think it's the communication workers literally goes through all of the labor things that Donald Trump did during his administration. Donald Trump is literally no friend of labor. Disdain for the intellectuals and the arts. Fascist nations tend to promote and tolerate open hostility to higher education and academia. It is not uncommon for professors and other academics to be censored or even arrested. Free expression in the arts is openly attacked, and the governments often refuse to fund the arts. The cultural Marxism, remember that? DEI, the colleges are indoctrinating your kids, remember that? The liberal media, remember that? Obsession with crime and punishment. Under fascist regimes, the police are given almost limitless power to enforce laws. The people are often willing to overlook police abuses or even forego civil liberties in the name of patriotism. There is often a national police force with the virtually unlimited power in fascist nations. Yeah, Donald Trump, remember, he runs on the law and order. He runs on that. Law and order, law and order, law and order. The only unions that are endorsing Trump in the 2024 election cycle, police unions. He campaigns on being tough on crime, despite the fact that he's a literal felon. And his supporters literally tried to kill multiple police officers on January 6th. But again, ignore that part. Rampant cronyism and corruption. Fascist regimes almost always are governed by groups of friends or associates who appointed each other to government positions and use governmental power and authority to protect their friends from accountability. It is not uncommon for fascist regimes for national resources and even treasures to be appropriated or even outright stolen by government leaders. Swing a dead cat in Washington and find any Republican politician, or for a matter, even most Democratic politicians that aren't corrupt or crony. So, yeah. Maybe not exactly onto this level, I'm not sure. I'm tired. It's almost 3 a.m. and yeah, probably wasn't the best idea to record this episode, but whatever, I'm doing it anyways. Fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassinations of opposition candidates. Use of legislation to control voting numbers or political district boundaries, and manipulation of the media. Fascist nations are also typically use their judiciaries to manipulate or control elections. Republican-appointed judiciaries do manipulate a lot of things. That is one thing. But also remember, Donald Trump literally tried to steal the 2020 election. So, yeah, I mean, if you've been paying attention, that's a 14 and a 14. I'm just saying. I could do a 14 characteristics on Kamala one day, but I guarantee you that it's going to be a lot similar to Joe Biden's one, where I did the same thing with Joe Biden in the last election. Not the last election. I think I did one at the beginning of this year and one at the end of last year just to make sure, just to like double check and stuff. Because I wanted to dispel the notion of like, it was like, oh, it's actually 99% Hitler versus 100% Hitler. It's like, no, it's not that. It's actually 0.2857142857% Hitler versus 100% Hitler. Which is true. Next is a different 14 characteristics from Umberto Eco. The cult of tradition, characterized by cultural syncretism, even at the risk of internal contradiction. When all truth has already been revealed by tradition, no new learning can occur, only further interpretation and refinement. Tradition, that is the thing. A lot of right-wing parties have the cult of tradition. They love tradition. They adhere to tradition, extreme tradition values, to the point where it is a literal cult. That is a fact. This is not fake. This is so confusing. The rejection of modernism, which views the rationalistic development of Western culture since the Enlightenment as a descent into depravity, with Eco distinguishing this from a rejection of superficial technological advancement, as many fascist regimes try to use industrial potency as proof of their vitality of their systems. So it's literally just the social aspects of modernism. Like, fascists will try to use, to a point where it is still arguments that are used to this day, where some people try to claim, Mussolini made the trains run on time, or Hitler made the Autobahn, to try and maintain, at least they had some beneficence, and how, in some, sci-fi worlds, authoritarian fascist empires can sometimes be portrayed in, a very, futuristic sense. The cult of action for action's sake, which dictates that action is a value in itself and should be taken without intellectual reflection. This, says Eco, is connected with anti-intellectualism and irrationalism, and is often manifest as an attack on modern culture and science. Yeah, this seems so fucking weird, because it's just this seems like just point to point to me. I might not be doing a good job explaining it, but literally, it's all these modern trends are trying to do bad things. That's one thing. It's they're trying to take away your sports because they changed the name of the Washington Redskins to being the Washington football team. And you need to do everything you can. If they ruin traditional marriage, what are they going to do next? What are they going to come after next? It's this isn't doing anything. What are you talking about? The science books now say that the boys can be girls. Whoa! What are they going to do next? And it's what? And then it will lead to things where, like, literally we live in the world where the fascists will literally burn down all the science books because they say things that disagree with the fake fairy tale book. Disagreement is treason. Fascism devalues intellectual discourse and critical reasoning as barriers to action, as well as out of fear that such analysis will expose the contradiction embodied by a syncretic fascist, in a syncretic fate. With this maintaining that all these newfangled new ideologies, all the opposition candidates, they're actually like anti-American, which is like very much a big problem. Like, if Donald Trump is in seriousness being like, I am the representation of America, then it's like, then we need to change what America represents. That's a fact. If he is the candidate that represents what America truly stands for, then you are saying that America is a shitty country. That's what you're saying. You're the one saying it, not me. I'm saying a candidate like this doesn't need to represent America. And people who disagree with that assessment are apparently treasonous. They're anti-American. Same thing with a lot of things in the past, where it's like, oh yeah, you don't want to rush into war immediately after 9/11? Terrorist sympathizers, you're un-American. Meanwhile, they'll again also be like, oh yeah, by the way, Donald Trump, go ahead and take over the Federal Communications Commission. I'm sure nothing bad will happen with that. Fear of difference, which fascism seeks to exploit and exacerbate, often in the form of racism or an appeal against foreigners and immigrants. Really? Again, Haitians, Mexicans, Muslims. He does it again. He'll do it continually because it's the only way he can exploit them. It's the literal meme. There's a meme where it's literally like a picture of a black man, a white man, and another white man, but the white man in the middle is a rich man, and the white man on one side is a working class man, and then the black guy is also a working class man. And here's what happens. Like, they have this. The immigrant, I guess, in this sense, because the meme has the word immigrant in it. So it's like, he has a cookie. And then the working class guy also has a cookie. And then the rich guy has multiple cookies behind him. And he turns to the white working class guy and says, that immigrant wants to take your cookie. And that's literally how it is. Like, they want to use that to exploit people's prejudice. Like, oh, they're the reasons why these things are going on. Not because of anything I'm doing. Even though they're the rich people, they're the ones in charge. It's not the fucking, like, random cleaning lady's fault that you don't have, like, good housing. But it doesn't matter, because they were able to point the finger, and you were able to be groomed into thinking that. So, it doesn't matter what anything else says. Appeal to a frustrated middle class, fearing economic pressure from the demands and aspirations of lower social groups. Again, similarly, trying to do the thing where it's like, oh, poor people are the reason why your taxes are so high, because we have to fund their welfare. Even though, again, it's not how it works, but whatever. Obsession with a plot, and the hyping up of an enemy threat. This often combines an appeal to xenophobia with a fear of disloyalty and sabotage from marginalized groups living within society. Echo also cites Pat Robertson's book, The New World Order, as a prominent example of a plot oppression. Which, yeah, a lot of right-wingers and a lot of conservatives have very conspiratorial mindsets. They believe that the Democrats are running a lot of them literally believe that Democrats are running a satanic cabal of pedophiles that rape kids and drink their blood. Like, this is the insane discourse we have, people. That is literally a mainstream conservative talking point at this point. You can pretend it's not, but that's what the big pundits are literally saying. One of the big things that Trump is running on is like, oh, there's an invasion coming from the southern border. When there's literally no invasion. Literally making up plots about like, oh, you see these governments, they're actually sending their immigrants over here. It's actually a plan. It's like, that's not how it works. Like, for real. What? Fascist societies rhetorically cast their enemies as, at the same time, too strong and too weak. On the one hand, fascists play up the power of certain disfavored elites to encourage their followers a sense of grievance and humiliation. On the other hand, fascist leaders point to the decadence of those elites as proof of their ultimate feebleness in the face of an overwhelming popular will. I think there's no better exemplification of this than the extreme demonization of the GOP with Joe Biden, where on one end, they portrayed Joe Biden as this weak, dementia-ridden idiot who didn't know what he was doing, was turning the country into shit, but then at the same time, oh, all these things that were happening, Joe Biden actually deliberately planned them in some way. He's portrayed as both incompetent, but also evil and conniving. Which is it? is Joe Biden an incompetent old man, or is he actually running a secret cabal of people? Which is it? Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy because life is permanent warfare. There must always be an enemy to fight. Both fascist Germany under Hitler and Italy under Mussolini worked first to organize and clean up their respective countries, and then build the war machines that they later intended to and did use, despite Germany being under restrictions of the Versailles Treaty and not to build a military force. This principle leads to a fundamental contradiction within fascism: the incompatibility of the ultimate triumph with perpetual war. This one is a bit more esoteric, but yeah, this is kind of one thing I'm seeing, where it's like, you know, Donald Trump, like, he said his campaign was Make America Great Again. And he's still running on, like, this, like, nostalgia from the olden days. But it's like, wait, then did America not become, like, this is the fucking weirdest thing. Like, he runs on Make America Great Again in 2016. Okay, that's one thing. Then, when it's 2020 time, instead of changing the slogan, he goes, let's keep running on Make America Great Again. It's like, what do you mean? You're the president. What do you mean? They will always look for this imagined past in this sense. Like, in the like, I don't know how this would work in a military context, but like, because again, this one is a bit more esoteric in the sense of, like, it has to be like that, but like, Trump was always going to look for that past that doesn't exist. They'll never run on continuing the legacy of the immediate past Republican president. They'll always run on, we need to run on the platform of a Republican president from long ago. Contempt for the weak, which is uncomfortably married to chauvinistic popular elitism, in which every member of society is superior to outsiders by virtue of belonging to the in-group. Eco sees this as attitudes to the root of a deep tension in the fundamentally hierarchical structure of fascist policies, as they encourage leaders to despise their underlings up to the ultimate leader, who holds the whole country in contempt for having allowed him to take it over by force. Yeah, I'll be real, I think Donald Trump's too fucking stupid to get this one. I guess that's one. Well, I mean, he does have contempt for the weak. He hates the weak. He always portrays himself as like, I'm strong, I'm powerful. That's one of his things about his campaign. It's like, I took a bullet for this country. It's like, no, you didn't. You got shot by some insane guy that I'm genuinely starting to think, like, did you plant him? Because, like, it seems a little weird, right? Like, I don't actually believe about, like, Trump conspiracy theories about the assassination, because I don't really fucking care about his assassination attempt. I really don't care. Like, I mean, seriously, it went in one ear, out the other ear. I don't really care. Everyone is educated to become a hero, which leads to the embrace of a cult of death. As Eco observes, the fascist hero is impatient to die. In his impatience, he is more frequently sends other people to death. I mean, I guess this one's gonna be a bit more esoteric, because again, like, it's of this way, but like, yeah, a lot of the conservatives do see themselves as like the main hero, like, that's the weird thing about fascists. So it's like, they're both extremely subordinate and extremely bootlicking, but on the other end, they also see themselves like, I am the boot. When it's not, they're not the boot. Never, like, almost never are they the boot. Almost always they are the tongue, particularly male fascists. Speaking of, machismo, which sublimates difficult work of permanent war and heroism into the sexual sphere. Fascists thus hold both disdain for women and intolerance of the condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Yeah, that's a weird thing, because especially it's weird, because on one end, fascists like to do the whole, like, traditional family values, which, in that sense, isn't chastity, like, a very huge part about that, but on the other end, we all know male fascists just love the idea of, like, having sex with all these women. That's what they love. They love that idea. They, of course, hate LGBTQ people. That's no-brainer. Again, prominent for conservatives. But, I mean, aside from, like, the, like, extremely old-school traditional conservatives, a lot of, like, fascists... I mean, again, like, remember, Trump, like, he kind of brags about the fact that he, like, was with all these women. So, yeah. Like, they love the idea of, like, being this, like, big man. And we're seeing this a lot, especially with the manosphere. But, yeah. Selective populism. The people, conceived monolithically, have a common will, distinct from and superior to the viewpoint of any individual. As no mass of people can ever be truly unanimous, the leader holds himself out as the interpreter of the popular will, though truly he alone dictates it. Fascists use this concept to delegitimize democratic institutions they accuse of no longer representing the voice of the people. Again, he wants to do unitary like unitary theory. That's what he wants to do. Unitary executive theory, where he wants to literally be like, yeah, all these people down below who like are gonna be like checks and balances, they're gonna like try and like prevent me from doing the things, even though they're appointed by other people, they're like chosen, elected. I'm just gonna like do all this stuff regardless. And Trump maintains that he's like, oh, I'm the candidate that represents America, even though he lost the popular vote in 2 elections. Newspeak. Fascism employs and promotes an impoverished vocabulary in order to limit critical reasoning. I mean, Trump actually literally has that in a sense. He has Trump speak. I don't know if it's deliberate, but that is a thing that he has. And those are all the definitions of fascism. I just wanted to, I'm going to end this a little bit later, but like, I just want to say this, like, just wanted to like do a quick rundown of like the literal, like, if you really don't believe that he's a fascist, it's like, guys, look at some of the people who is backing him, literally right now. Alexander Lukashenko, an authoritarian leader of Belarus, literally grooming his son to be the next leader. Literally running a political dynasty, dude. Javier Milei, the president whose VP is literally a member of a fascist pro-military authority party. Jair Bolsonaro, the pro-fascist military dictatorship party leader. Itamar Ben-Gvir, leader of Israel's fascist party. Giorgia Meloni, the leader of the Italian party with roots in neo-fascism. And Alice Weidel, the leader of the neo-Nazi Alternative for Deutschland. Like, guys, when this is your bedfellows, you're really not picking a good side, let's be real. Anyway, sorry if this episode came off a little weird, a little bit, whatever. Also, I don't know if I'll put this in, like, any part of the episode, but be prepared for the idea that maybe I might only do 1 main series video this month. You know, just because, like, I'm trying to recalibrate and whatever. But anyways, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.